Welcome to day 12 of the 21 Days of Prayer podcast with REVO Church. One of the special things about this podcast is how we have people from all three campuses, all different ages. We have REVO Church staff and REVO Church members, all with one topic, one thing on our minds, and that is connecting with our God in prayer. So I have the expert on day 12 with us here today. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm John Mullis. I go to North Campus. Also am a student volunteer.
Let's go.
And do other odd and end things around the church.
Tons of odds and ends things. We love John. Very thankful for John. Thanks for being here today. You wrote on Romans 12, and you had a passage in Acts as well as kind of the story from Acts chapter 9. And so I wanted to ask how you connected a popular verse, Romans 12, verse 2, on renewal of mind and transforming. And how did you connect that idea and that topic that you had, those verses, with prayer?
So for me, it was, when we come to God, he starts to change us. Our minds start to change.
Yeah.
So in that prayer, it talks about not being conformed to the world, being transformed by the renewal of your mind. So praying, learning to discern the will of God, and really learn to hear his voice and what he wants for you, because it says it's perfect and good. We can do things ourselves. It never turns out the way it does when God wants it and God ordains it. Because when God's hands on it, man, it's awesome.
Right. And so that connecting that then is the idea of, all right, so God's transforming my mind, renewing my mind. Yep. And one of the ways that he's doing that is through prayer and by prayer, coming to see his will.
Yeah. And I mean, your wants, your desires, those things start to line up with him. The prayer, connecting it with prayer, man, it's just a way for you to really connect to God and just really develop that relationship with him, so you can learn what it is God wants for you. Because, I mean, I can tell you, like, for me, 35 years of doing what John wanted, man, ended up in a lot of bad situations. But for the last 5 years, really getting still, praying, and finding out what it is that God wants for me, man, it's been awesome. I'm sitting right here.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy.
Right. Yeah. You wouldn't have thought 6 years ago.
No.
I never. You wouldn't have guessed. You wouldn't have guessed this.
No, not at all. And I mean, that's not what I wanted for my life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it just wasn't. But as I started to develop that relationship with God, and my mind started to change, and the things that I started to pray for started to change, man, like, my world opened up, and words can't describe what God has done.
It's a transformation, kind of like Acts chapter 9,
Yes.
kind of like Saul's,
like Saul. I mean, he's out here persecuting Christians, and then he meets Jesus on a road in Damascus, and man, he's transformed.
Right.
And it just shows that, man, like, no matter what, no matter how far you are, you're never too far from God's grace.
Right. And what's interesting about Paul's story is that he doesn't have this conversion moment and then immediately become this, like, incredible preacher and writer of letters. And, like, he actually, in Galatians, and a little bit of it's in Acts as well, but he talks about how he goes off to different places by himself, or he goes to Jerusalem to learn from Peter and the other foundational members of the early church. And so it's even for Paul, it's a overtime renewal and transformation that happens.
And I mean, everybody wants that overnight success, overnight story, that instant gratification. Unfortunately, it's the society we live in today.
Yep.
But patience, faith, and prayer. Pray.
Yeah, I love that connection.
If you can't figure out the next step to take, you can't figure out the next thing to do, man, pray. Just pray.
I know some of that's super connected to your story, and how I'm sure this was challenging and also rewarding for you to write.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit, like, what made this a challenge, what made this rewarding, day 12 and these particular verses.
So, me and you've talked before, I struggle with what God is doing for me. Mm-hmm. Not in the sense of not being happy about it or not being grateful for it, but, man, I was a terrible person.
Yeah.
Like, I was a bad person.
Yeah.
And the things he's doing for me and doing for my family, and just, it blows my mind. So in reading this, it challenges me because I don't give God enough credit.
Right. Right.
And I struggle with that because I don't sometimes feel worthy.
Mm-hmm.
And so this walking worthy of your calling, it challenged me because I feel like I'm not worthy a lot. But God tells me I am, and he settles all those fears. But it was rewarding in the sense of it let me see what God has done.
Mm-hmm.
It let me see how now my mind has been transformed. My heart has been transformed, all because I surrendered and I started asking God for help.
Yeah.
Instead of telling God, I don't need you.
So much so that a mind that 6 years ago would not have been able to sit here and have a conversation like this has been transformed.
No.
And I mean, heck, I don't even know if you could have had a conversation like this 3 years ago.
No.
And so just the slow, over time, transformational process of God's grace, getting you from point A to point B to point C to point D, and so on and so forth. And
to the fact that I can sit here and talk to you about it now.
Right.
Because before I couldn't. And it wasn't that I didn't have the knowledge. It was a fear of not feeling like I sounded right.
Yeah. Even more so than just not being saved. It was that you just still had fears and worries and anxieties. So,
and through prayer, God told me I didn't create you that way. That's not who you are. Don't have fear.
And here you are. I love it.
I am.
I love it.
So
as we think about day 12 and closing it down for today, what's a next step, a challenge, a practical application step that everybody listening or who is reading your day today, that you can challenge them with? Something that's, all right, I got something for you to do today, or something for you to do this week.
I mean, very simple. I'd pray and ask God to reveal to you what it is in the world that you're chasing that you don't need to. What is it that you glorify over him? Because there's something. I could think of something right now. My job.
Yeah.
Because the world has told me I have to go to work every day to support my family. So a lot of days I will put my job over God. And so that's been a challenge for me.
Right.
So my prayer to God is that he can take that away from me. That he can give me his will and put me in the place he wants me and doing the things he wants me to do when he wants me to do it. Not just running wide open all the time.
Yeah. The ability to trust God with that.
Exactly. So, I mean, like I said, my challenge is to ask God to just reveal something that you need to take out of your life. Something that you are glorifying more than him.
Yeah.
So, and watch your life transform when you get rid of it.
Right. Heart, mind, life, the whole 9 yards.
The simplest things, man.
Yeah.
You know, I tell this story, tithing. 1 week, I do an automatic tithe every week.
Yep.
You know, I like to do my bills that way. That way I don't ever see the money.
Yeah.
I don't have it then.
Yeah, it's just easy.
But I can remember 1 week, we didn't have a lot of food in the house. I didn't have a lot of money. That $50 tithe I was doing was going to take everything we had. And I almost canceled my tithe. And something said, don't do it. And I didn't. And when I tell you that next week, God blessed us way more than we deserved. And I truly believe it was just from that little bit of obedience. And that was a transforming of my mind because money used to be my God. And that was what I lived my life for.
Right.
Was money and drugs.
Yeah.
And so now I live my life for God. And man, this is going to sound terrible, but you know, if you've never been somebody who seek getting high or whatever, the high that comes from God, man, is
yeah.
Man, and I chase that every day.
Yeah. The joy that he gives is so much better than anything the world can offer.
I thank God that he made me an addict because my addict mentality has made me chase God way harder than anything else.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea. I think I'm the same way in that like I love pleasure and thrill seeking so much that actually realizing that my deepest and ultimate desires are met in God and who he is for me in Jesus Christ. Like when you begin to have those things and that lights your brain on fire, it's so much better than anything else. And that becomes a chase that just glorifies and honors God when he is the true ultimate treasure of your heart and your mind.
Well, you know, I think about like Paul's interaction with Jesus on the road to Damascus. I think about my interaction with my leader that day in my program. I'm dying on this hill. I'm going through withdrawals, like I'm struggling. I can't take another step. And he comes over and says, man, can I just pray for you? Sure. Why not? Something's got to happen. And man, he prays for me. And I kid you not, 10 seconds later, I am running up and down that hill. And in that moment, I didn't realize what had happened. But in the next morning, in my journaling and reflection, I realized what happened.
Right.
And I told God right then, I said, all right, I'm in.
That's cool. I love, just conclude it with that story, man. That great next step of asking God to reveal what it is that you have in a higher position, put up on a pedestal, glorifying and honoring and loving more than Him. That's a great challenge for us all today on day 12. Yeah,
be intentional about your thoughts.
Yeah.
Be intentional about it. And when you journal or whatever you do for your quiet time the next day, ask God. Ask God to reveal attitudes to you.
I bet that's a prayer he'll answer too.
And it'll start to transform you. Right. I promise you, because if you're more aware of what you're doing, you'll be more aware of what you're doing.
Yeah. So I love it. Thanks for being here, John. Day 12 has been awesome. And the podcast just the same. So thanks for writing it. Thanks for giving your time to us on day 12. And hope you guys got blessed by day 12 and that God can use these 21 days of prayer to spark a revolution of life change in your heart and in your life through Jesus. We'll see you tomorrow.